The calendar says 8 hours. The brain says otherwise. Modern knowledge work doesn't respect a shift schedule. A founder who can't track the logic of a term sheet at midnight, an executive whose decision quality collapses on the second day of a conference, an engineer who can feel their reasoning slow down after 6 hours of deep work. These people are not lazy. They are managing a cognitive asset with no real maintenance protocol. And when the pressure becomes unsustainable, most of them reach for something. Energy drinks, a second cup of coffee, a pill a colleague mentioned. The nootropics market generates billions of dollars per year precisely because the demand is real. But most content in this space makes one of two mistakes. It either overpromises what a compound can do, or it hides the trade-offs. Both are costly errors when the asset being managed is your own brain. This video covers 3 tools, each solving a different problem. The first addresses the chronic stress that silently erodes decision quality. The second addresses focused alertness without the mental volatility that comes from stimulants used carelessly. The third is probably not the compound most people expect, and it may be the most practically useful of the 3. Welcome to Human OS Lab, where we upgrade performance without breaking the system. The 3 compounds here were selected against one standard: quality of human evidence, honest trade-offs, and whether they support sustainable cognitive performance rather than borrowed stimulation. This is educational content, not medical advice. If you have a health condition, take prescription medication, or are pregnant, please consult a qualified clinician or pharmacist before use. The first performance problem is one that most high performers misdiagnose. They assume the issue is insufficient stimulation. The actual issue is dysregulated stress. Think about what happens in the hours before a high-stakes board presentation, or in the 3rd week of a demanding product sprint. The cognitive load is not just high, it is compounding. The stress response that evolved to handle short physical threats is being triggered repeatedly by emails, social pressure, decision fatigue, and uncertainty. Over time, chronically elevated cortisol degrades the cognitive functions high performers most depend on: working memory, mental flexibility, and executive decision-making. More stimulation on top of that system does not help. It accelerates the decline. This is the problem ashwagandha is actually positioned to address. Ashwagandha is an adaptogen, thought to help the body regulate its stress response rather than simply suppress it. The human evidence for reducing perceived stress and cortisol is among the more consistent in the adaptogen category. Several randomized controlled trials using standardized extracts have found meaningful reductions in self-reported stress, improvements in sleep quality, and support for general well-being under chronic load. Some studies suggest modest improvements in memory and reaction time, though the cognitive data is less robust than the stress reduction evidence. The practical use case is not acute performance. Ashwagandha is not something you take before an investor call and expect to feel. It is a background protocol for people whose chronic stress load is quietly degrading their cognitive baseline, making every hard day harder than it needs to be. The key limitation is time. Effects in most studies appear after several weeks of consistent use. The common mistake high performers make is reaching for more stimulants when the real problem is a system that is already running too hot. Ashwagandha does not add fuel. It reduces friction. Caution. It interacts with thyroid medications and immunosuppressants, should be avoided during pregnancy, and product quality varies, so sourcing matters. Discuss with a clinician if any of those apply to you. Check the pinned comment and description for the supporting sources and the focus checklist. The second performance problem is more familiar, and the solution is already in most people's hands. It is 4:30 in the afternoon. There is a decision that needs to be made. A pricing call, a hiring conversation, a document that requires genuine reasoning. The brain is signaling that it is done. The default response is another coffee, and caffeine, used strategically, is one of the most evidence-supported cognitive tools available. But most high performers are not using it strategically. They are using it reactively, in response to fatigue rather than in anticipation of a performance window, and at timing that quietly erodes the sleep quality that makes tomorrow's decision-making possible. The more intelligent version of this approach pairs caffeine with l-theanine, an amino acid found naturally in green tea. Human evidence suggests the combination may produce more sustained alertness with reduced anxiety and fewer jittery side effects than caffeine alone. The mechanism. L-theanine appears to promote a state of relaxed attention that softens caffeine's more agitating edge. The result is alert and precise rather than wired and scattered. More alert is not always more effective. Caffeine's effect on sleep is the trade-off most high performers underestimate. With a half-life of roughly 5 to 7 hours in most adults, caffeine consumed in the mid-afternoon is still meaningfully active at midnight. Impaired sleep, even mildly, reduces the decision quality you were trying to protect in the first place. Focus without recovery is just debt. The strategy the evidence supports is earlier timing, moderate amounts, and intentional caffeine-free windows to reduce reliance and protect sleep. Caution: use carefully with cardiovascular conditions, anxiety disorders, or medications that interact with stimulants. Discuss with a clinician if relevant. If you want evidence-aware tools for focus, energy, sleep, and long-term cognitive performance, subscribe to Human OS Lab. The third performance problem is the one most Nootropics content ignores entirely, and the solution is the compound almost no one expects. The problem is not that high performers cannot focus. It is that their cognitive floor, their baseline capacity on a hard travel day, on day 4 of a demanding sprint, on a night of disrupted sleep, is lower than it needs to be. They are not failing to reach their peak. They are losing the ability to protect their floor. Creatine. Most people associate creatine with athletic performance, and the evidence there is well established. But the brain also uses phosphocreatine as an energy buffer, particularly under cognitively demanding conditions or during mental fatigue. Several human studies have found that creatine supplementation may support cognitive performance, particularly in tasks requiring short-term memory and reasoning under fatigue. Effects appear most pronounced when baseline creatine levels are lower, which may be more common in people who eat little or no red meat. The practical use case is not pushing a high ceiling higher. It is floor protection. Maintaining reliable cognitive output on the days when conditions are not ideal, because for most high performers, ideal conditions are the exception, not the rule. Creatine monohydrate is widely available, relatively inexpensive, and has a long safety record in healthy adults. Those with kidney disease should consult a physician before use. There is no meaningful nootropic stack that compensates for consistently poor sleep. None. Sleep is when the brain clears metabolic waste, consolidates memory, and resets the stress systems that make executive function possible. A compound that helps you push through one disrupted night is useful. A lifestyle that makes every night a disrupted night, offset by stimulants, is not a performance strategy. It is slow deterioration with a productivity aesthetic. The hierarchy the evidence actually supports looks like this. First, sleep and circadian stability. Second, nutrition, hydration, movement, and managed stress. Third, strategic use of tools like the ones covered here. Fourth, and critically, recovery. These compounds are amplifiers. They are most useful when the system underneath them is functioning. Ashwagandha cannot outperform a sleep deficit. Caffeine cannot replace the executive function that only rest provides. Creatine can buffer cognitive energy, but it is not a substitute for the biology that creates it. The experiments in performance optimization that tend to fail are the ones that treat the brain as a machine to be overclocked. The experiments that tend to work treat the brain as a biological system to be maintained. A sharper mind tomorrow matters more than a harder push today. High performance is not a destination you reach by forcing more out of a depleted system. It is what happens when a well-maintained system operates at its natural capacity. The goal is not to become a machine. The goal is to build a system that performs reliably, recovers efficiently, and compounds over time. That is what sustainable cognitive performance actually looks like. And that is the upgrade worth building.